composing her new album, Kate had become deeply influenced by world music. This record contains many unusual instruments and influences, ranging from Irish folk to the Bulgarian trio Bulgarka, who are also featured on the record.
The trio Bulgarka, these lovely, really wizened old women from Bulgaria, with their amazing shimmering voices, and she's singing, and she has a shimmering quality to her voice as well. I think she chose her world music, if you like, very well and very carefully. At that point, world music as an influence was very popular. We had Peter Gabriel doing it, we had Paul Simon doing it with Gracelands and going out to South Africa. A lot of artists were incorporating it into their sound, and some more successfully than others. And I think Kate did it in a way that was quite subtle.
Kate Bush's sixth studio album, The Sensual World, was released in October 1989. The record seems to represent a change in its author.
I think in a way this was her new maturity as an artist. I think she felt, okay, I've arrived now. She'd obviously established herself with the record company to the extent that in a way, she was a free agent. Okay, I'm going to take time now.
The Sensual World is a mature album. It's Kate's first post-30 album. I mean, coming after the masterpiece of Hounds and Love was perhaps never going to get the acclaim that it perhaps deserved.
The singles from this are quite moving. They're not big hits, but they are hits. A Woman's Work is from this record, and is really moving. But people could really relate to that.
I know you have a little life in you yet. I know you have a lot of strength left. I know you have a little life in you yet. I know you have a lot of strength left.
The most successful single from the record was the title track itself, released in September 1989.
The sensual world, that is what she lives in. That's the heart of her life, is that sensual world. Much as she's a very thoughtful person, and much as she reads the papers and knows what's going on in the world, for sure, and uses all that information in her songs, nonetheless, the sensual world is where it's at, and it comes from James Joyce, from Ulysses, and the final passage, I believe, not being a person who's ever been able to get through Ulysses, but I understand that what she wrote is derived from the final passage of Ulysses, a long internal monologue by the character Molly Bloom, which Kate actually wanted to set to music, but James Joyce's estate refused her permission to do that, so she had to write her own version of it, which I believe she does quite wonderfully. And she has, it's a beautifully expressed, highly sensual lyric, but with her singing and the music exactly fitting what she's on about as well.
He said I was a flower of the mountains, but now I've powers over a woman's body.
In a strange way, you'd say that Kate Bush, in her view of sensuality, sexuality, kind of always transcends lust because she thinks it's wonderful and good and great, and it's about communing with the other person and having a wonderful time. So the crudity that lust implies really isn't a part of Kate Bush's sensual world.
After the release of The Sensual World, the next anyone was to hear from Kate Bush was in the September of 1993, when she released Rubber Band Girl from her up-and-coming album, The Red Shoes.
Rubber Band Girl. In a way, it takes me back to Babushka and some of those more rollicking pop tracks. It's lovely. It just sort of came out just at that point where she was a serious artist, and we've got this quite light pop song which works really well. It swings.
She seems to want to create, possibly rather than recreate, the possibility of her being a pop singer. And it does have that feel to it. It's like a nice, classic, not exactly could have come out of the 50s, but in a certain way you feel, well, that could almost be a 50s pop song with a bit of an edge.
The Red Shoes followed in the November and was marked by the guest appearances of several celebrity collaborators.
The Red Shoes itself is a strange album because on one level it's her most conventional sounding record in many ways. Partly because you've got all these celebrity guests on it, which is something she hadn't really done before. You know, from Eric Clapton to Prince, Lenny Henry.
What's the point of having Lenny Henry unless people know it's Lenny Henry? One problem of having a lot of famous guest stars is that you dilute your own vision. It's really hard to have famous people on without drawing attention to the fact that it's them. And one of the most wonderful things about Kate Bush is that her records are Kate Bush records. It's almost as if there's a Kate Bush universe in which none of us visit. We don't have the passport to get into the Kate Bush universe. And yet on this album, a lot of people had the passport to get into the Kate Bush universe.
There's a sadness about it which crops up from time to time. There's a line repeated about life being pain. That crops up in 2 songs, obviously consciously. And the truth is her mother had died a short while before this album was made, or completed at least. And you just think, well, that's in there. She said she didn't want to deal with it. She couldn't deal with it head on, so to speak.